Hi, my name is George Coles, and I am an avid retro video game collector.
Do a barrel roll!
I have decided to document my journeys as I grow my collection. Please join me as I share with you my finds. Welcome to Retro Game Treasure Hunting. Hi everybody, and welcome to a Retro Game Treasure Hunting Top 10. My name is George Coles, as the opener had said. Normally this is a staple of my page, but I do wrestling and mostly wrestling related top 10s. But since I'm adding a little bit more video game content, I wanted to add some top 10s related to that. So the topic of this one, video game franchises that need a reboot. Now I'm going to preface this with saying, we're going to assume that the reboot's going to be good quality games. I don't want to reboot anything just to reboot it in name. Some of these are things that have long needed a sequel. Some of them there's not so much interest in, but I think it would be cool to bring back in this generation. With all that being said, let's jump right into our top 10. Number 10. The Bonk series. If you're a fan of TurboGrafx 16 or PC Engine, depending on where you played it, you'll remember fondly the Bonk series. Bonk was kind of the mascot for the system, almost like a Sonic or Mario would have been. And these games were extremely fun. They made them for other systems, of course, but to me, the standouts were the Bonk's games on TurboGrafx. And being a kid that had TurboGrafx, and there wasn't many of us in my neighborhood, I think there was only me and my friend Bill, and everyone else had Genesis and Super Nintendo and NES before that. So you kind of didn't get a whole crazy library. There wasn't games coming out every week like the other systems. But what you did get, you get some really high quality games. And the Bonk's games were extremely fun. I always liked the concept. I liked the idea of just a caveman running around beating everything up with his head. And they were simple, they were fun. With the way the gaming system or gaming industry is going now, with a lot of indie titles being 2D side-scrolling type adventure games, I think it would be prime for a series like this to come back and just put out some fun, interesting games. At the very least, maybe a Bonk's compilation. Now, coming off of that, number 9. Almost said 8. Anyway. Road Rash. Now, if you remember the Road Rash games, they were a motorcycle racing game that also incorporated elements of fighting. You would hit each other with bats and chains and motorcycles, basically to knock each other off the bikes to get a competitive edge. It was almost like a no-rules street race kind of thing. And they were extremely fun games. The reason they kind of went away is EA did what EA always does. They spammed the marketplace. They put a bunch of the same title out rapidly to where the fact that the fan base gets tired of it. I think it would be prime for Road Rash to make a comeback. I think especially with the way we game now and online gaming being a thing, I could easily see you getting into a Road Rash motorcycle club and having club versus club races and stuff of that nature. I think it would be extremely fun. Plus, there's not a tremendously large amount of just racing games. So to add that in, I think it would be one that's primed for a comeback. Now our number 8, the actual number 8 this time, Dino Crisis. I know by the time we got to Dino Crisis 3, it went a little bit stupid. But to me, the first two, it kind of feels like Resident Evil, how Resident Evil's been retooled and they're relaunching the old games. I kind of always felt that Dino Crisis was somewhere between Resident Evil and Turok. And to me, I don't think there's enough dinosaur games. With as prevalent as dinosaurs are in all of popular culture, I mean, it's a fun thing to cover. I mean, every kid likes dinosaurs. Everyone learns about them in school. And the Dino Crisis, at least the first two games, were very fun, very cool. I'd like to see what we could do in this generation with a more expansive, more open world kind of experience. I think it would be a great game to come into this era, kind of get like the Tomb Raider update, where the new Tomb Raider games, which are all fantastic, keep it really on with what the original franchise were, just updated graphics and updated stylizing. And I think you could do that for Dino Crisis and make some excellent games. Now, our number 7. This one's kind of a franchise I'm surprised that isn't still around, and that's Contra. I don't understand, well, I do understand why the Contra series fizzled out. It kind of lost its way when it went from the 2D side-scroller to 3D, but there were some good Contra 3D games. And I think when you juxtapose it against the rise of games like Fortnite, and I know I'm not saying make a Contra Battle Royale, don't get me wrong here, but when we see a game like Fortnite that has elements of fantasy mixed in with the gameplay, it's kind of something that Contra always did. They were realistic to a point, but you fought aliens, you had guns that did insane things against physics. And I think that could be something that's fun, especially if you add in a multiplayer map, kind of like we said with Fortnite. I wouldn't say necessarily Battle Royale, but maybe just your normal online multiplayer would be a fun thing to add into this. And I think the series, it has a lot of clout behind the name. Contra were some of the most fun and most challenging games of their generation. And I think a nice reboot, a new, I don't want to say grittier, because I do want to keep the unrealistic elements in there, a new, better graphically enhanced version of Contra, I think would be a massive hit. Speaking of hits, our number 6. NFL Blitz. Now, I know that Madden has the franchise that they are the only ones that can do an NFL team or NFL game, which is why it's become stagnant. But there was a time that arcade-style sports games were all the rage. You had games like this, games like NBA Jam, NHL Hits, Mutant League Football. There were different takes on just a sporting game. The NBA Street Series, as a matter of fact, or the Street in every series. They had NFL Street and Soccer Street as well. But to me, I think it's something that's missing from this generation of sports games. I think we're too worried about Madden and how realistic and true to the game it could be, where I think there's a lot of us that want to just have a fun arcade-style, monster hits, crazy plays, just insane, wacky game come back. And I think it can be worked out. I think if you took away maybe some of the things that the NFL shies away from, which I know is one of the main reasons why we can't get a game like this off the board, because the NFL shied away from crazy hits, like hits to the head, hits that are going to injure people. And I understand that. It's for the betterment of the game and betterment of its players. But you could still do an NFL Blitz where you have those elements in there and it wouldn't detract from the game or from the actual NFL, because I think people would realize, much like you realize that Mortal Kombat's not a real MMA fight, that's a fantasy version of it. People would realize the same thing about Blitz. And I think it would be a game and a series that I think is primed for a comeback. Now, number 5. We're going to go with one of the creepiest game series that there ever was, and that's Silent Hill. True story, when the first Silent Hill came out, I have a good friend named Damon who purchased it, and I didn't get it right away. He got it before me. So I had asked him about it. I said, what do you think about this game? Do you think it's good? Do you like it? What's the positives? What's the negatives? And the only thing he told me is, it's so good that I can't play it after dark when I'm home by myself. It freaks him out. It freaked him out that much. And these games were neat. They were cool. They had that nice little fantasy type suspense, thriller, horror. It was kind of a little bit of a different spin on the horror genre. It wasn't all about gore and guts. It was more made you think and made you go through puzzles. And I thought they were excellent games. I thought it was a great series that could easily be reinvented for this generation. And I like the games. I think they'd be fun, especially, and I go back, a lot of these games I'm choosing is because of what's popular now. Like I said with Bonk, you got a lot of indie games that are doing Metroidvania style 2D scrollers. Things that are missing. Silent Hill, we kind of have some really great survival horror or some really great horror themed games, but we don't have a lot of them other than, your Resident Evils, Last of Us, which was a fantastic game. Games like that, Enemy Within, I believe is the name. The name for some reason doesn't sound right, but was a fantastic game as well. But I think we need to have more in that genre, because I do believe there are people like myself and others out there that enjoy that kind of thing and would have fun with it, just for the fact that there's a lot of people that like psychological thrillers / horror movies. Now, our number 4, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to put 2 series together. And the reason why is there's 2 Star Wars series that I considered for the list, and I couldn't decide which one I wanted to put in, so I combined them into one entry. If you're a fan of Star Wars, which I am, I'm a mega Star Wars fan, and a video game fan, you know there's not a lot of great Star Wars games. Some of them are very uninspired, some of them are just downright bad. However, in the history of Star Wars games, there's 2 franchises within the franchise that went above and beyond. And one would be Rogue Squadron, Rogue Leader, the Rogue series, where you're basically in a Star Wars flying simulator. And I think that would be an amazing game to bring around, especially if you make it VR compatible, where you're actually wearing a helmet and you're in the cockpit flying around. I think that would be an interesting experience. To me, the games were amazing even without doing that, so just having them even fly, just a good flying game, much like I said with Road Rash, there's not a great amount of good flying games out there, let alone flying games that incorporate such a rich tapestry like Star Wars would. And you have TIE Fighters and Millennium Falcon and X-Wings and Y-Wings that everybody wants to fly. And I think that this would be a great series that would be good to be rebooted. Now, coming off that, our second part is the Knights of the Old Republic series. Much like Rogue Squadron did for the flying of the Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic is the series that you felt most like becoming a Jedi, becoming a Sith. This was a series that took and gave you that feeling in a very vast RPG that gave you options. You could pretty much do as you wanted, and you could feel yourself shift to the dark and the light side. And with the way it leveled up, you felt yourself gain powers, learn different things. It realistically felt like you were learning how to be a Jedi or a Sith, depending on how you played it. And I thought the series was fantastic. To me, it's in my top list of all RPG series, and a lot of people think this way. A lot of people that aren't even Star Wars fans think that these games are fantastic. The last one we had was the Old Republic MMO, which got mixed reviews. I think that a lot of people liked it. it had a nice run, about 5-6 years. I don't know if the servers are still active, but I'm sure they are, actually, to be honest with you. But for everybody who liked the Old Republic MMO, there's a dozen that didn't like it. So maybe going back to what it was originally, just a strategy type RPG, would be a fantastic way to reintroduce this, especially now that since the last incarnation of it, we've had 4 more movies of lore to gain from. And I know it's not set in this time frame, but you adding to the lore with the different kinds of people and different species you meet, you can adjust them to that time frame as well. Now, coming from that, we're going to go to our number 3, and we're going to stay in the RPG world. 2 of the best RPGs of all time, of the 90s, of whatever you want to say, of Square's catalog, Chrono Cross and Chrono Trigger. Now, I know Chrono Cross gets a little bit of flack from people. I actually like it better than Chrono Trigger, and I know, hear me out, Chrono Trigger I think is fantastic. I really like that game. I like the fighting style on Chrono Cross a little bit better. And to me, I enjoy that game. It's more fun to me. I know I'm in the minority. I know that I'm crazy on this one. But that's my feeling. Either way you look at it, you have an A and an A+ property. You have 2 fantastic games. 2 games that most people will put in, or at least one of the 2, in their list of top 10 RPGs of all time. And I know in the early 2000s there were plans for a 3rd Chrono game that never kind of came to fruition. It's been 20 years now. I think it's prime time for Square to take us back into this series, and maybe they could preference it. Maybe they could do a Chrono Cross, Chrono Trigger HD reissue and see how that works, and if that works, maybe make a 3rd game. I don't know. To me, as a fan of the series, I think it's something that desperately needs to come back, and I can't understand why it hasn't been capitalized on yet. Now, number 2. I had to put this one at number 2. There's no way around it, for one reason and one reason only. Valve does not know how to count to 3, so they don't know anything else on the rest of my list. And that's the Half-Life series. Can you believe it's been 12 years since a Half-Life game came out? As innovative and as fantastic as those first 2 games were, it's been a dozen years since we've had a Half-Life game. And I know it's famously Valve gets stuck on 2, hence why I made that joke. But what is it going to take to get us Half-Life 3? What can we get? I mean, it's baffling that you would take a franchise like this that people are clamoring over. People are still playing Half-Life 2. I know people that have bought it 4 and 5 different iterations of it when they've upgraded computers, or they've got their original as a CD-ROM or DVD-ROM or whatever it was back then. I honestly don't remember. And then got a Steam version now, and got it on console, and got it 4 or 5 different ways, and continue to buy it. All because they're clamoring for a new version of it. And I think Valve, I'm not sure why, but this seems to be the MO with them. And I'd really love to see such an innovative franchise like Half-Life make a comeback in this generation of games. I think it would be amazing to see what they can do with the processing powers that computers have now. Even if you put it on a home console, the processing power of the consoles that are out now is exponentially better than what it was 12 years ago. And the kind of game you could produce on that, I just think it would be amazing to have it come back. Now, before we get into our number 1, like we normally do on the channel, we have a thing called Best of the Rest. And basically this is things that were considered for the list but didn't quite make it. Coming into that, we're going to go with Golden Axe. Again, this is a seminal series, much like Bonk's, a side-scroller that's synonymous with the Sega Genesis and that era of gaming. I think that this is a game that, like I said, with Bonk's, I think side-scrollers or 2D games are coming back into exception with the fact that a lot of people do retro gaming, with the fact that there's a lot of 2D Metroidvania style. I know it's a curse. Type games that people are gravitating back to that style because it was a fun system. And I think this is a game that would be great, especially for an online multiplayer thing. I mean, they always had the option of people could play at the time. So imagine that nowadays. They could even do this as a dungeon crawler, kind of make it in the vein of Diablo, and it still would be a great series to reintroduce. Now, sticking with the Shinobi series and our best of the Genesis, I gave away the title, the Shinobi series. This was a game I think a lot of people enjoyed the ninja aspects and the difficulty of it, and I think that bringing something like that back into the forefront, bringing Shinobi back for this generation, maybe making it something like Yakuza, where it's a beat-em-up style game, or kind of like an Assassin's Creed style, somewhere in there, an updated version of just being a ninja. Because much like I said with Dino Crisis, what kid doesn't want to be a ninja? What kid doesn't love ninjas? I mean, they're all throughout all of physical media. They're in cartoons, they're on TV shows. Hell, the Wu-Tang Clan made their popularity rapping about basically being ninjas, and I just think it's another franchise that could come back and make a huge impact. And last but not least, on our best of the rest, the SSX series. And much like I said with Road Rash, EA ran the series into the ground to the point where people were like, okay, enough is enough, I'm going to stop buying these. However, like I said with Blitz, I think it's time for some of the not so serious, more fun sports titles to come back. I could easily put Tony Hawk in here, Dave Mirra, BMX. But I think these games, SSX, Cool Borders, the fun downhill, snowboarding, doing crazy tricks type game, I think that that's something that a lot of people had fun with. And I think it's time that we bring something like that back. And I think it could be an easy game. You know, it doesn't have to be graphically superior to anything else. It just has to be a good, fun game. And I think it's time for these to bring that back. Now, before we get into our number one, if you think I left something off the list, you think I put something up too high, something too low, let me know what you think. Hit me up down here in the comments. Tell me what series you'd like to see back. And also make sure you hit the like, share, subscribe, ding that bell, all that good stuff that every YouTube channel tells you. And last but not least, our number one series that needs a comeback, Castlevania. Now, to me, I think Castlevania is one of the seminal series of all time. There have been great iterations on Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, PlayStation, PlayStation 2, 3, and then it just kind of went away. With all of the, again, with the success of the Netflix series, with the fact that it's Castlevania, it's a series that everybody instantly remembers and has fond memories for. Well, a lot of people have fond memories. A lot of people think the games are hard, which they are. I think that that's part of the appeal to them, is that they're not a simple game to beat. I really think that it's time to get the Belmont clan back and to have a new Castlevania for this generation. We've seen them work in 2D style. We've seen the games work in 3D style. I think a new iteration of it would be amazing to have. And you could dial up something similar to the feel of Bloodborne, where It's hyper realistic, and you could add that in there, and you can make it happen and make it work for this generation. And I think, again, it's one of those things that it makes me scratch my head that I don't understand why some of these franchises aren't still being put out, because all of the games in the Castlevania series did well and sold well, and most of them were well received. So I'm not sure what the disconnect is, but to me, I think it's another series that is primed for a comeback, and I think people would jump all aboard on it. But basically, that's my opinion of the top 10 video game franchises that need a reboot. Again, let me know what you think. Hit me up in the comments. My name is George Coles, and this has been another Retro Game Treasure Hunting Top 10.